Well, as the race heats up to the 2016 elections, a strong sentiment is being discussed across the country. Americans are questioning the culture of Washington, the role of lobbyists, and the influence that they have on elections. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump and Jeb Bush have already publicly denounced lobbyists, while other candidates are demanding changes to our lobbying laws. But according to Harvard University professor and author Mark Fagan, this rhetoric could be dangerous to the future of our country. According to Fagan, lobbying groups can perform important advocacy work, make significant changes, and provide policymakers with information on key issues. He spells this out in his new book, as we now welcome to our studios author and professor and lecturer on public policy at Harvard University, Mark Fagan. Welcome to Urban Update. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, let's sort of get right to it here. Now, you take a look at the pros and cons of lobbying in your new book, and your new book is called, by the way, is
Lobbying, Business, Law, and Public Policy.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's talk about the pros and the cons.
Sure.
How about let's give us the bad news first. What about the cons? Everybody hates lobbyists.
You're absolutely right about that. And as you did in your introduction, certainly the political presidential candidates love to bash lobbying. There's a long history of this, and it goes on both sides of the political spectrum. The reason is, if you're running for office, you're running against Washington. The emblematic symbol of the negativity in Washington is lobbyists. Why? Well, they've shot themselves in the foot for a long period of time. We've had some terrible scandals, like the Abramoff scandal. And there is a sense that lobbyists buy their way into the policy making. I want to turn that around, though.
Okay,
and I've given you the bad news.
Okay, let's talk about the pros, because that's what you're trying to, that's what you want to talk about in your book.
Exactly. Here are several things that lobbyists really bring to the table. First and foremost, they provide information for policymakers. If you're a member of Congress or a member of the administration, there are literally dozens, hundreds of policy issues you need to be knowledgeable about. How on earth are you going to get that knowledge? Even the smartest can't keep up with everything from energy to immigration to poverty. Lobbyists turn out to be a fantastic source of information for policymakers. In addition to that, lobbyists have a real understanding of how things actually get done, whether it's on Beacon Hill or Capitol Hill. They understand the process of how, the sausage making of legislation. That is worth a tremendous amount to especially new members of Congress or the administration.
Now, one of the points that you make is that, in your view, lobbying is deeply rooted in democracy. What do you mean by that?
Well, the opportunity to lobby, the right to petition your government, dates back to the founding of the country. It's enshrined in the First Amendment, and it isn't going anywhere. Ever since the country was founded, we've had lobbyists, advocates who have kind of put forward what they feel we need to make good policy.
Okay. Now, you also believe that there's a cause for concern as the 2016 elections draw near. Talk to me what your concern is about, I guess, all this bashing of lobbyists.
Well, I think what the bashing does is it continues the negativity, and that negativity can reduce actually the amount of lobbying and advocacy that takes place. The term advocacy seems to be a much more attractive way of referring to the same thing, and in that case, I want as many voices as possible in the debates, in the discussions. I fear with this bashing, the voices in particular that get drowned out are the voices of you, me, the social action organizations, because they're fearful of being tainted with what I might call the scarlet L.
Okay, now, amidst all these new demands for changes in lobbying, what do you think are some of the innovative ideas that you think can sort of level the playing field in your view?
I think the biggest one is social media. In the past, if you or I had an issue you wanted to try and address, your ability to find like-minded people was pretty limited. You might talk to your neighbors or go to a school meeting. With social media, I can almost instantaneously find people who have the same kinds of concerns and issues I have I can find them, amass them, and communicate very effectively and very cost effectively with Washington or Beacon Hill.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess how do you respond to all the critics who say that that money plays just too large a role in the lobbying and in elections?
Well, certainly in elections, I would agree with you. There's no question we're spending a tremendous amount of resources in the elections. I'll leave that for someone else.
I just want to ask, how do you get around that criticism that whoever's got the most money has the most influence when it comes to forming public policy?
Great point. Here, though, on issues that are important to you, to me, and to the general public, the number of voices and the different perspectives they bring is tremendous. If I can use one example, when we did the Affordable Care Act, there were all sides represented. On one hand, you had a large trade group, pharma, which was advocating for increasing prescription opportunities. On the other hand, you had hospitals and insurance companies advocating the exact opposite. You had AARP and its 30 million people advocating for seniors' rights. In the big issues, you have the voices you need to be heard.
How do you increase accessibility and really lift up ethics throughout the lobbying industry?
Well, there I have some proposals. How well they'll be accepted, I'm not sure. In terms of the ethics, it seems to me that in addition to just having an ethics statement that a trade group has, it ought to be codified. It ought to be something that's enforceable, not unlike the American Bar Association and how they deal with lawyers. I think that would be a good start. Another option, which is a little more challenging but maybe ultimately the most effective, is to try and separate campaign finance from lobbying itself. Very hard road to hoe, though, given the Supreme Court's view on campaign finance.
Who is your book for? Who's your audience? Is it for lobbyists? Is it for regular people? Is it for politicians who are the ones who are going to be lobbied?
It's, I think, for all of those people. Lobbying is one of those things where there are very few degrees in it or majors in it, and there aren't very many textbooks in it either that are accessible. My intent was to create essentially a handbook that you or I or a lobbyist could take, use to better understand the industry, and most importantly, how you and I can have a voice in Washington.
And how do you think an average person, when they watch all the debates, they watch all the cable shows, all this information coming at them, what lobbyists are saying, how is an average person, a lay person, to really sort of evaluate what they're hearing from lobbyists and know what to believe and not to believe?
I think for the average person, it's hard because it's unambiguous that lobbyists, certainly in the public sphere, have spin. But I'm less concerned about that because the person I really worry about and want to make sure really gets the right picture is the policymaker themselves. When I've spoken to people, what they tell me is, Mark, if I'm smart enough to figure out how to get elected and be a senator in the United States of America, I'm smart enough to understand that the people who walk in my door all have a perspective. My job, my value add, is to take all those perspectives, evaluate them, and do what I think is right for my constituents and my own conscience.
And ask you don't teach any classes on this, do you?
I do teach a class on this.
What's the main thing you try to get across to your students when you talk to them about lobbying and public policy?
The number one thing I want them to understand is you can have a voice, but you have to understand how you communicate. You got to be crisp, you got to be to the point, and most importantly, you got to know who to talk to.
Okay, it sounds like good advice to me. Professor Mark Fagan of Harvard University, and the title of your book once again is?
It's Lobbying, Business, Law, and Public Policy.
Okay, thanks for coming in, and we'll see hopefully some of the folks who are running for president. We've got a big group of them. We'll take some of your advice.
Terrific, thank you so much.
All right, thanks. Well, when we come back, an organization dedicated to rescuing fresh food that might otherwise go to waste. All the details right here in Urban Update. Stay with us. We'll be right back.